Hey everybody, John Lorden here. Welcome to another episode of Itchy Mysteries for today, August 10th, 2017. Hope you're all having a great week out there. If you're seeing the title here and saying, John, didn't you review that already? Not quite. I did review another documentary back in October of 2016 called Jack the Ripper, Prime Suspect. This also aired, I think it was produced by the BBC as well. What we're talking about today is different. It is Jack the Ripper, the definitive story. And there's a bit of a difference. If you watch the Itchy Mysteries from back in October, you'll notice that I talked about how I wish that they would have spent more time with the topic, that it really could have been a full-blown documentary, but unfortunately, the version that I saw of Jack the Ripper Prime Suspect was only about 45 minutes long. Well, Jack the Ripper, the definitive story, is setting out to do what is in the title. It wants to be an entry point, I think, for people that maybe aren't familiar with the Jack the Ripper lore. It goes through, in a very methodical way, of describing the events, where the information came from that's leading to the conclusions that the story is taking as it goes forward. And it does this really interesting thing where it uses computer-generated imagery to show you the areas of downtown London where this is all happening as they would have looked back at that time. And they claim that even they got the detail of the lighting right, so you would see these alleyways and streets lit appropriately for how they were at the time. Now, apparently, if you go looking online, you can find people that dispute that. Ripperologists can be very exacting in terms of their detail, their level of detail they're looking for. So, and of course, you know, you're working with CGI, you're trying to recreate something from 120 years ago. I think it's always going to be debatable if you're nailing it right or not. However, the effort put into this documentary clearly shows. For me, the way that the information is structured, very easy to digest. I love that it notes where the information's coming from very subtly. Just all of a sudden, you'll see a little titling on the bottom of the screen that mentions a newspaper where that information came from, or the narrator will be very clear that this information came from a particular witness or a particular person. It seems like the closest thing that I've seen to a facts-driven approach to the Jack the Ripper story, which quite honestly, I didn't even know if that existed. I didn't know if there was, I mean, I know that there's a lot of really good records from back then around this case, but a lot of those records could typically reflect the assumptions of some people, the comments of another, and in all that, sometimes the truth gets lost. There was a big challenge in, you know, you didn't have CSI back then. You didn't have people that were even necessarily taking pictures of all the crime scenes. So, and you also had this mentality that, you know, when they found a body, they wanted to clean that up so that people wouldn't be disturbed by seeing that there. So there was a lot of things working against finding, I think, what we would consider in terms of our modern view of detective work on a case like this. There were a lot of challenges in terms of finding that level of information, but this documentary does a great job of pulling together as much as it can and giving you as close of a view as I think you're ever going to be able to get of what happened throughout this period of these murders. I was really, really impressed. Now, the CGI is not mind-blowing. This was produced back in 2010, and you know, the CGI might look a little dated, but for its functionality of just giving you an idea of what the streets look like, I think it works really well. They use actors. They actually call this a docudrama, which I think is a really, really clever way of naming it. They use actors. They have the actors sometimes reciting scenes or phrasing that these people were known to say, or quotes from particular people. And it just works really well for me. It was just a very approachable way to get this information. If I had any knocks about it, I would say some of the actors being laid over CGI elements, like the streets in the back being computer generated, didn't always look super, super great. But it's really, really forgivable because you understand what the intent is. They're really trying to give you a view of what was going on back at that time. And it's not a multi-million dollar Hollywood budget that they're working with here. So it was pretty excusable for me. Even there's one thing about green screening that drives me a little bit nutty, and that's when people are out of focus, particularly in the background of some shots, because the environment has a very hard line around where the green screen ends and that blurry person begins, and the blurriness, natural blurriness, doesn't look like that. So there are a couple scenes when I was watching this where I was like, ooh, I wish they would have just, shot that a little different so they didn't have those people blurry in the background. And, this is probably getting way too complex for this show, but if you film people not blurry and then put them in the background, you can blur them after the background has been added, and it would look way, way better. And unfortunately, they didn't have the foresight to do that on this. But I'm telling you, it's only a few scenes. It really doesn't take away that much. I want to call out the narration, and I really liked, his name is Paul Begg, and apparently he is also an author. Some people consider him the leading author in terms of Jack the Ripper information. I just want to call him out because this docudrama is a perfect example of why you don't need to do creepy, spooky storytelling tricks to convey this type of thing to your audience. His voice is clean and clear. He's not trying to sell you on the emotion of what's going on. He's almost just listing the facts for you. And the facts are detailed and grisly enough that is where the fear is generating from. Also, in a similar way, I didn't notice I noticed some music in some places, but it never took me out of the scene where I thought, wow, they're trying to, gouge at my emotions by playing this super scary music under all this. The music was totally appropriate. His narration was really respectful. I really enjoyed it. Outside of all that, as I've noted, at least on the other Jack the Ripper documentary that I reviewed, there is some grisly information. There are some scenes of these murder victims, and even in the recreations, they use a lot of blood in some of the recreations. So if you are squeamish, get a little queasy at that kind of stuff, know that you're going to have some tough moments in this docudrama, even knowing that they're fictionalized. They're doing a pretty good job in terms of the scene recreations and conveying the true gruesomeness and horror that was happening to these people. But I don't feel like it's overplayed. I don't feel like it's something that was done to try to rile up the audience. I do believe that it's being fair to the original source and just trying to convey that information to you in a decent way. So for me personally, this is the Jack the Ripper documentary that I wanted when I reviewed the first one back in October. It's about an hour and a half. It was broken up into two parts when it originally aired in the UK. I think it's two 45-minute segments. I've seen people complaining, particularly on Amazon, that it looks like there was never a US DVD release. I don't know if that's necessarily true, but people want to see it here in the US. Luckily, there are a few locations on YouTube that are currently hosting it. I will have a link in the description box below so you can check it out for yourself. I want to give this an 8.5 out of 10. I really don't know how they can have done much better outside of the little CGI stuff that I was mentioning. But it was just very well written, very well researched, very well presented. It really fires on all levels for me in terms of what I want to see in a Jack the Ripper documentary. And by the way, let me just put out, I am not the biggest fan of that story. I have not really done a deep dive into that topic. I believe it is a huge topic. It takes years to research. From what I've seen, they took 10 years researching it for this particular film. So know that there is a lot of work going into it. And I think, especially if you are not a Ripperologist, if you don't consider yourself some kind of expert on it, I really think you're going to enjoy this. If you are an expert on it, you might enjoy it. You might enjoy seeing things that you think are incorrect in it or picking it apart. From what I read about it, it strays away from a lot of the current theories that have kind of cropped up. It really keeps itself limited to theories that only the investigators from back at that time considered, which once again, I think is super fair to the topic. Check it out. I think you're going to enjoy it. Minor note for the squeamish. It might get to you a little bit. Great narration, great information, music is appropriate, CGI effects work 90% of the time, acting works 90% of the time. There's only one actor in particular that stood out where I was like, whoa, I really would have reshot that. Or it seemed like they dubbed his voice. I would have redubbed it. There was just one performance. I'm not going to tell you who. If you watch it, you're going to know when you see it. But other than that, the actors did a good job. I thought the costuming was good. Check it out. I think you'll enjoy it. Take care, everyone. I'll see you back here tomorrow for an episode of Brain Scratch on the Lord and Arch channel.